My interests are in water resources, primarily in the western U.S., where water is a big deal. I'm different from a lot of people that look at water from an engineering or a legal perspective, and that I look at it from a policy perspective. The Colorado River, some people call the hardest working river in the world, and by that, it is the primary water supply source for the southwestern U.S. Some 40 million people depend on the river for water. It's a river that people expect a lot from, but it's not really that big of a river. In terms of flow, it's not even in the top 20 in the U.S. Those extreme demands that are only growing, combined with the fact that it's not that big of a river, means that the Colorado is in trouble. I mean, there's just too much pressure on the Colorado. It doesn't make it to the ocean. It hasn't made it to the ocean for decades now. That's a pretty good, pretty visible symbol that the river is under a lot of stress. Well, climate change affects the hydrology in the region in a lot of ways. The atmosphere is a little warmer. It means you'll get less snow in the winter. You might get more rain throughout the year, because there's some of these storms that normally would have fallen as snow will fall as rain, and that it changes when the water runs off into the stream. The other thing is you get more extremes, so you get bigger and deeper droughts than you had before, but you also get more extreme flood events than you've had before, so you get these big extremes. The basin's actually pretty well set up to deal with that, because it has these two huge storage reservoirs. So the thing that the Colorado is most vulnerable to is this gradual downward sloping average runoff each year. Looks like over the next 40 to 50 years, you could see maybe 10-15% decline in flows. But for a basin that's demands are already at or larger than supplies, and that's a region that's experiencing rapid population growth. The fastest growing states in the country are, by and large, the southwestern U.S. You throw climate change on top of that, and you throw on top of that the fact that there's already problems with there's not enough water for environmental protection and that sort of thing. Climate change just kind of piling on to all these other problems. Even without climate change, it was a basin that was in trouble, but with climate change, things get really tricky. The way the Colorado River is allocated is called the Law of the River. So the 7 states got together and they negotiated a compact. And in 1922, they agreed to a system that they thought essentially divided the river in half and gave half the water to the 4 states upstream, which is Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico, and the other half to the states downstream, which is California, Arizona, and Nevada. The problem is, the 20 years leading up to this negotiation, it turned out that was like the wettest 20 years in the past probably 500 years. But they thought that was the normal flow. The problem is, by the time you get 10 or 20 years after that compact, by the time you get to the 1940s, people are starting to realize that they severely overestimated how much water there is. And so from that point to the present day, you've had this issue of how should you fix this mistake? Colorado River policy, on the one hand, is incredibly complicated, and you can get lost in those details. And about the point you get lost in those details, I think you come out on the other side and say, actually, this is incredibly simple. This is about basic sharing. This is about incentives. This is about, if I get less, does that mean you get more? And if that's what it means, why should I do that? And it's a lot about fear. People behave in funny ways when they're afraid, and the communities get afraid about losing water. They get afraid of running out of water, but they also get afraid about losing the ability to control those decisions about water. These are all simple things. I'm reminded of that saying that everything you need to know in life, you probably learned in kindergarten. This is once you get through all the details of the Law of the River, that's kind of where you come out at. And it's interesting, because the challenge is to dive into all these complicated laws and policies and find those little parts that speak to these more universal fears and problems, and try to tweak them. And so when I talk to people about the Colorado, I'll give them some of the details about the laws and policies. But the thing that you really need to come out from that is some of these larger challenges, which are pretty universal.